Welcome to Fierce Conversations with Toby, the podcast where we dive deep into the art of overcoming. Here we share powerful stories that ignite healing and inspire profound transformations in your own journey. I'm Toby Dorr, and together we'll explore the resilience, courage, and fierce determination that turn life's challenges into stepping stones for growth. Let's begin this transformative journey together. Hi, this is Toby, and I'm so excited to bring you into my newest episode of Fierce Conversations with Toby. My guest is Serene Singh, and Serene, I had the most interesting meeting with her because she's actually a Rhodes Scholar at the University of Oxford, and she's pursuing a doctoral degree in criminology. And she was working on her paper was about women and the death penalty. And of course, my really good friend Lisa Montgomery was executed by the federal government in January of 2021. And so Serene reached out to me to talk to me to get information about that experience. And we just became really good friends. And so I'm delighted to have her on our podcast. So welcome, Serene.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm grateful to be here.
Yes, and it's so wonderful because Serene's in England, of course. She's at Oxford University. So, our podcast goes everywhere, and I just love that. So, one of the things that I've learned about Serene is that she not only is she an excellent student, she's got all kinds of awards for her scholarship, a Truman Scholar, a Fulbright recipient, and she graduated from the University of Colorado, summa cum laude. But she's also really involved in women's empowerment movements. So she's created the Serenity Project to give confidence and self-love tools to women survivors. She's written a best-selling children's book to help young girls develop confidence. And there's just no stopping her. And the coolest thing I think is the last sentence of her bio says that she plans to advance her passion for public service to one day serve on the United States Supreme Court. What an awesome goal. And I have no doubt you'll make it. So we're going to talk about some really cool things today. So thanks for being here. Before we get started, I would like to ask you what your favorite color is and what do you think the color says about you?
Oh, Toby, I love that question. And also, thank you so much for the kind words before. I would say my favorite color at this point in my life is actually red. I think it's because it is a remarkably passionate color. And I used to do a lot
Mhm.
of color psychology during my debate days, where I would think a lot about how is the audience going to perceive me if I wear a red suit versus a pink suit versus a
Oh,
blue suit versus a black
interesting.
suit. And red was
Yes.
always the one that really indicated passion. And one thing that is very true about me in all of the different realms that I have my foot in is passion. And so to communicate that, if nothing else, to any audience I'm in front of or amidst, is I think the most important thing they can take away.
Mhm.
That, regardless of what Serene said or what she's interested in, I know that she's passionate about it.
I love that. That's a great question or a great answer. I love red too. So, um, tell us about a crossroads in your life. And actually, I'd really like to know how you chose researching women in the death penalty. I think that's so interesting and something that most people don't even talk about.
It's very true, Toby. Most people don't talk about I think criminal justice, especially in the United States
Mhm.
as it is in modern
Yes.
day, as well as definitely capital punishment. And it's a very real topic. It's something that the United States, I think Sister Helen Prejean says it beautifully, where she says it's one of those areas where, there's a mile long worth of support for it, but an inch deep worth of knowledge of it,
Oh, yeah.
something to that effect. And I think that's such a true testament to how little people know about the death penalty, but also how little people actually,
Yes.
how few people actually go into this type of work. So
Mhm.
I think to answer your question, this probably stems from much earlier on in my life. I would say growing up, I have always held on to my faith in many ways, and my faith is a Sikh, Sikh. So Sikhism something that is a very core tenet of my Sikh philosophy is that of oneness, that we are all connected together and that there is one shared light among all of us. And to recognize that shared light is actually the enlightenment. It's the broader purpose. We name it as Ik Onkar. And Ik Onkar is not just for when it is easiest to hang out with people or when you are with your friends or when you are in a shared political party. Ikonkar is really the essence of, can I be amidst people who maybe society has taught me to feel a certain way about, or have
Mm.
been given knowledge through media, through textbooks, through my educational institutions about this community or this group of people that has rendered feelings of fear or disdain or maybe anger towards. And how can I reconcile that with true oneness? And I think that was the origin for me of many different activities that I have pursued related to oneness, of how can I become a better Sikh, and how can I become therefore a better human being and a public servant that is in the truest form doing public service, something that
Mhm.
is the betterment of all of us.
I love that. My really close friend, Lisa Montgomery, was executed on January 13th of 2021. And Lisa had 4 children and 12 grandchildren, and her children loved her. I mean, her crime was horrific, but Lisa was a person, I think, that was so broken. And at the time that I knew her, when she was in prison with me, she was under the care of a psychiatrist. She was on psychiatric medications, and she was in a very stable and structured environment. She didn't do well with chaos and decision making. So I think the Lisa that I got to know and love is the true Lisa that could have been had she had a good life or society had supported her in some way. So, and I'm sure that's the Lisa that her children knew and her grandchildren knew. And all of her grandchildren were born after she was in prison. So they never knew her outside prison. They never got to hug her because when you're on death row, your visits are behind glass, which is just so sad because who needs a hug more than someone that's on death row, for goodness sakes? But this whole experience was so traumatic for Lisa's children and her grandchildren. And her oldest grandchild has struggled through so many things. And, no, they don't know how to help him. And I believe that a big impact of that is what he went through with his grandmother being executed. And it, her execution didn't take away her crime. And I don't believe it can even lessen the pain that the victim's family felt, but it just added more pain into the world to a whole nother set of people, and I don't see how that's a good thing.
Toby, I agree with that. We have a notion that something like an execution or something like death penalty, and I think
Mhm,
this is largely because of American miseducation, is predominantly and only going to affect those who are incarcerated. But to your
mhm,
point, it never is the case. It is something that has compounding effects, effects that we will probably never actually be able to put our finger on. And how many
mhm,
generations after does something that traumatic and that painful and that system impact a family? I think
mhm.
one part of the incarceration system that I was really shocked by, especially in this research, is how dependent it is on loving families. That if you have a loved one who's incarcerated, whether they're on death row or not,
Mhm.
to be able to purchase stamps, to be able to purchase food, to be able to purchase meals from canteen, to be able to support when it comes to your health. Maybe your loved one's health is not doing well and they need a little bit of reinforcement from the external lawyers or someone from the outside world to be able to push that in the facility. It is so dependent on the love of family members. And that means that it's not just one person fighting a battle inside a prison facility, it's so many people that are
That's right.
constantly pushing up against
It
it.
is it is so true, and I think the rate of women being incarcerated in the United States is doubled what's the rate of men. It's doubled in increase acco- uh, compared to the rate of men being incarcerated. And so many of those women are mothers. And I think there's a lot of crimes where we send mothers to prison when we could do society such a better service if we found a way to keep those mothers at home with their children and put them in some kind of a training or some kind of a monitored environment where they could learn better behaviors and and not go to prison, because when you send a mother to prison, the children go to prison too. They're incarcerated too, and they're so affected by the lack of having that mother in their life. And
Hmm.
visiting hours are not very long, and they're not very often, and many times they're a 2 or 3-hour drive away. So, those children just languish without a mother, and it doesn't help society at all. It's a real problem, I think.
Toby, I have to say, when I first told my parents about this research that I am about to embark on a couple of years ago, I remember my mother's first response, which was, "Are these women mothers?" To which I said, "Many of them
Mhm,
are." And
mhm,
immediately it was this shared understanding that mothers have, I think, all around the world, which is
mhm.
how painful it is for a mother to be separated from her children. And
Yes.
that role of motherhood, that role to nourish, that role to be able to support the blossoming of something
Mhm.
so close to a miracle is a miracle. It is the closest thing to a miracle, I believe. And to cut
Yes.
off that role because of incarceration or because of one's sentencing is is a pain point. It's a pain. It's one of the pains of imprisonment, as we speak about in academia, but it's one that really hasn't been discussed very much because it is infrequent compared to men for women to
Mhm,
be mothers, for women and mothers to be
mhm,
sentenced to death.
mhm.
But it is one that's very important because it's very different than fatherhood, and it's very
Yes.
differently impacting
Mhm.
as you mentioned, the children.
Yeah, and the cost of phone calls is just so unaffordable, and the majority of people in prison are low-income families. And, when I was in prison, I had a really good friend who I called every day, and he told me, "Just call me every day." After I got out of prison, he told me that his phone bill for the entire 27 months I was in prison was greater than his car payment every month. That's I was blessed that I had a friend who could afford that and was willing to gift me those phone calls because he was my lifeline to staying sane. And so many women, the majority, I'd say 90% of the women in prison don't have someone that can afford to pay for that much in phone calls. And I never felt like we talked that long. I didn't feel like it was like the majority of my day. It was one phone call in the evening.
Mm.
It's just ridiculous that truly these businesses have a captive, literally and figuratively, a captive audience, and they can charge what they want for phone calls. They can charge what they want for a candy bar. They I even think that they add more to the price of a stamp, and I think it's illegal to charge more for stamps anywhere. Anyone who sells stamps sells them at the price the post office does, but I think in prisons they can add a surcharge to the cost of a stamp. So it makes it even more difficult. Postage is expensive enough, but to have to pay more because you're in prison and the only contact you have with your children is through the mail or through a phone call, it just something really needs to change. And I don't and until the people who make the decisions experienced a loved one going through it, I'm not sure that there'll be enough emphasis on the need to change.
Wow. Toby, I mean, you've said so many important and really interesting things there. I can speak to my own credit card bill after having done the data collection on my end, and it
Mhm.
it
Mhm.
was alarming to me, just like I probably was with your friend.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
it is the case that families and those who choose to communicate with or speak with or stay in touch with loved ones incarcerated have to foot that bill. And sometimes it's the
Yes.
women who are in the facilities that have to foot part of the bill, and that is
Mhm.
especially for women on death row, I think that's almost an impossible ask, given that many of them can't make money, given that they're not allowed to have
Yes.
a job. So
They're not allowed to have a job. That's right. That's right.
exactly, exactly, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I even sent Lisa when Lisa was given an execution date, I mailed her a card, and it was in a blue envelope, and it was returned to me because people on death row aren't allowed a colored envelope. If there's anybody in this world that needs a colored envelope, it's somebody on death row. I mean, why? I don't see any reason for that other than to just be mean, just to deny him one more thing because someone else in the prison could have had that blue envelope, but not someone on death row. I, it doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't make sense.
And Toby, that's such a good point too, because it speaks to a broader system of rules that are sometimes arbitrary in how they're set up or why they're set up. And to your point, I think there's so many contradictions that occur. So it's not the case that color is void in prisons, or these women on death row will never see anything colorful. They will, but it's whether or not the facility will endorse something like a blue card or an envelope. And I think that's something that I'm really interested in, even with this research of how and why do these arbitrary rules exist, and how do they also impact the women, because naturally, she probably was delayed receiving your card because it came back to you when you sent it. It came back
Yes,
to you. That takes a lot of extra time. Then you had to repackage it, resend it out. It has to go through prison scanning in order to get to her. So all of that extra delayed in that time, it almost contributes to
that's right. And she was on
you have
death
to do the
row with
work.
an exudation and an execution date set. It wasn't like that whole returning to me took like 3 weeks, and
Right,
then I returned it back. She might not have had 3 weeks,
right.
it when time is of the essence, it's so lengthy and drawn out that it makes it not feasible. It's
Yes,
just ridiculous.
yes,
So what were
absolutely.
some of the things you found in your study that surprised you?
Oh, Toby, it's a good question. I am in the midst right now of still writing up. And so what that means
Mhm,
is my actual bedroom looks like it's got sticky notes all over. It's got all kinds of
mhm,
last minute thoughts that I have in my work room, my desk, my cabinets, all of the desktop monitors that I have. It's if you put it all together, it looks like a investigation center. And the reason being is because there's so many different facets. There,
mhm,
I think researching something like conditions of confinement naturally already opened me up to many different facets, but speaking to so many individuals in this research like yourself, who were willing to share with me different lenses to the
mhm,
challenges of knowing or being a woman on death row. I have everything from health to prison treatment to experiences and psychological threat of something like an
mhm,
execution, to motherhood, to job opportunities or employment, to pains and challenges, emotionally rooted. The list is truly properly endless, Toby. I'm sitting here, not able to say exactly where the research is going and what exactly I'm finding as I'm still analyzing, but I think
mhm,
I think in every section that I pull out of this is the section that is focused on X category, I learn very quickly that it's actually related to A, B, C,
oh,
D, E, F,
yes.
G, and I already
Mhm,
analyzed Y, but it's actually directly
mhm,
connected to Y. And here's how it speaks to a broader issue of Z. And that is part of the network that exists when it
mhm,
comes to conditions of confinement and looking at the
mhm.
experiences that women have on death row, that it speaks to broader patterns as well as smaller patterns that we wouldn't have necessarily seen. So I'm totally in the thick of it right now, but I hope to keep you
I can't
posted.
wait. I can't wait to read it when you're done. I'm so excited about it. I think it's
Thank
gonna be
you.
awesome. I hope it opens a lot of eyes and gives a lot of people, the passion to try to make a change, because I think the more people that you can get, information out too, to let them. People don't even know what it's like, because prisons by intention are away. They're away from people, and it's because they don't want you to even consider what's going on, just because that's part of prison. You're just away from the world. So I know when I was in prison, I slipped and fell in my room. The floors are concrete and they polish them all the time. So like they shine. They're slick. They're really slick. And I was in my stocking feet, and I slipped in my room and fell and broke my leg. They didn't x-ray it for 10 days. And when they finally did x-ray it and found out it was broken, I had to be taken out of the prison to an orthopedic doctor. And he said it was broken in, my leg was broken in two places, and it was a pretty severe break, and it was out of place. But 10 days is too long to set it in the office. So he said I needed to have surgery, and they said, no, just put a cast on it. So they did. And, my leg still bothers me when I walk on it a lot. And another friend of mine, the day she was arrested, she was scheduled the following day to have surgery to remove a tumor from her uterus. She was going to have a hysterectomy. She had a tumor. And she begged the marshals, please, 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 I'll turn myself in, but let me have my surgery tomorrow. And then when I get out of the hospital, I'll come and I'll turn myself in. And they said no. And they took her, and they never treated her. And 9 months later, her stomach kept growing. It looked like she was pregnant. 9 months later, her tumor ruptured, and they had to rush her to the emergency room, and she nearly died. And the tumor was 12 and a half pounds, the doctor said. I don't understand why you can't just provide care for people because they're in prison. They shouldn't just languish in pain, but there's so many things that need to change. And I think truly it's because people don't know what happens. They don't know what is going on, and the people that it's happening to don't have a way to make their stories heard as long as they're in prison, because it just doesn't work. And you can't mail a story out or anything. So we really need to make some serious changes. And the United States has less than 5% of the world population, and they have 25% of the world's incarcerated population. And that doesn't make sense. I don't believe that we have more criminals. I just think that we have less consideration in sending someone to prison. It's just an answer for all kinds of societal problems that really aren't criminal problems. Sending somebody to prison because they didn't pay child support, or how are they going to pay child support when they're in prison? It just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make a bit of sense. So I'm really excited to see what happens in your research. So what other things have happened in your life that have caused positive change and propelled you in new directions?
Oh, thanks, Toby, for that. And to what you've just said, um, you've said so many important nuggets in that. I think, yes, your own experience of knowing the system from within and seeing it and wondering, why is this happening, or how does this make sense? And then I think also now looking, from the outside in, your reflections are really powerful of why is it that we have mass incarceration in the United States, and why is it that prisons and the ability to speak about what has happened in someone's life, or the challenges that someone's experiencing, or whatever it might be, is so difficult to access and to get out to the public. I think those are real structural barriers that make it remarkably difficult for the broader public to actually be educated on how incarceration works, what do prisons look like, and what happens after someone enters a prison. What does life
Mhm.
actually look like from that point on? And obviously far less so even for women on death row. I think there's many people even who have been incarcerated that have never interacted with someone on death row, or
Yes,
have
that's
seen what
true.
that part of the facility or that treatment looks like. So I think there's so much privacy when it comes to who
Mhm.
can know and how much can they know. And that is
Yeah.
exactly to your point of suddenly, the American public probably doesn't know it happens very often, or they don't really know what that looks like. So the question is, how can we make sure that more Americans actually have a chance to set foot in
Yes.
a facility, to actually see
Mhm.
it for themselves in a real
Yes.
way? And I think you've said that perfectly. So to answer your question, Toby, let's see, what have I been up to what was it, to benefit society? Was that the question?
Uh, what 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 in your past has caused positive change, and what has propelled you in new directions in your life? What's motivated you to go in some of the directions you have?
Toby, I find that with, I think initially on, my faith set up a lot of the structure surrounding oneness and surrounding the importance of
Mhm.
humanization. And I think that propelled me into many unfamiliar environments that were potentially even very controversial. So, pursuing something like pageantry, pursuing something like working across the aisle on various political realms. So, from local gubernatorial state officials to the United States Senate to even United States presidents, and not not going through much of my career thus far with a lens and an echo chamber of I am right, and anyone who subscribes to the beliefs that I subscribe
Mhm.
to, or has had the education that I've had, is right. Rather, trying to surround myself and immerse myself with what is, most disagreeable or most confusing for people who in my echo chamber would say otherwise. And that has been intellectually uncomfortable, but really powerful, because suddenly I get a
Mhm.
new understanding and a new lens to be able to wear and see the world through. And that I find, Toby, to be something that I hope to continue to be something I use as a tool moving forward in my life, to not just apply the power of empathy and the power of compassion and the power of integrity and authenticity when it's convenient for my beliefs and my communities, but to do that when it is most inconvenient, when it is controversial, when it is against the norm, to do so for communities that maybe were not mine prior, maybe do not represent the identities that I represent, maybe have no significant similarities to my own that I can see. But suddenly,
Mhm.
that humanity bridge really gets to be built. And I found that to be even the case in this research as well.
Hmm. I think that's really powerful. Personally, I believe that it's in our darkest valleys where we really learn the most. And so a lot of times people will want to say, "Oh, I'm so sorry you had to go through that." And I say, I'm blessed to have gone through it because I learned from it. And I love that you're actually going out and grabbing the things that aren't popular, that aren't comfortable, that are the hard things, and you're putting yourself in the midst of that trench and that turmoil and really digging in and trying to make sense of it. And I think that that requires a lot of courage and a lot of compassion and a lot of purpose, and it's very powerful, I think, because that's really where you can make a difference. That's really where you can make some serious changes in the world. And I really applaud you for the work that you're doing, and I can't wait to see what kind of an impact it has. And I think it has to have impact because you've done so much research and put so much work into it. I think something will come from it. I think it's a voice that people will have to hear. So, I
Thank
can't
you,
wait.
Zoe.
Welcome. Welcome. So, who's been your most important mentor?
Toby, there are so many women I look up to in my life, and I think across centuries. I look up
Mhm,
to I look up to many of the women in Sikh history who
mhm,
were remarkably courageous amidst a lot of strife, a lot of caste discrimination, a lot of
Mm.
religious imperialism, and
Mhm.
they remained strong and courageous in their values, but also in their own conviction of what is right. I
Mhm.
also always love to speak about one of my personal favorite mentors in Sikh history, whose name is Bhai Kanhaiya Ji. Bhai Kanhaiya Ji in Sikh history was known to be the person amidst many battles that would happen with Sikh soldiers fighting for religious freedom and liberation against Mughal Empire soldiers. And after a long night of battle, one sick man would be walking around and giving out water to everyone who maybe was unable to get up, maybe was right at the close end of death. Maybe they just needed a little bit of water in order to get up and to continue on for the next day. And he'd be in the field giving out water. And some Sikhs would come up to him and say, "What are you doing giving water to the enemies? You're giving water to everyone. You're not even looking at who they are or what color they're
Mhm.
wearing. You're just giving water. You have to stop that." And to him, he said, "My job is not to discriminate on who gets this fundamental need and right. My job is to serve. I don't see the enemy versus the friends. To me, everyone is a brother. Everyone is family." And I think that notion of, to me, everyone is part of one, is one, Toby, that I hope, as difficult as life always is in these types of
Mhm.
spaces, I hope to always hold on to really near to my heart. And even in my own office, I keep a picture of a small painting of what that scene might have looked like, because I don't have cameras at that time. But I've got a painting of what that scene might have looked like, just to remind myself to always hold true to
Mhm.
that value. And to your point, I find that in this present day, one of my strongest role models is probably my mom. And I say that
Yes.
also because she she is someone, as we spoke about a little bit earlier, with the courage and the importance of being able to be courageously curious and courageous even when you might be standing alone. That is something that, as a military wife, she has done for decades. And
Mm.
I don't think there's a single speech and debate weekend throughout my entire elementary, middle school, high school career that she ever missed. I don't think there's
Mm.
a single after school club, sport, parent teacher conference that she's ever missed. I don't think that there's a single event in my life that I can say my mom wasn't there cheering for me actively on live stream, somehow vicariously being
Mhm.
present, no matter what was going on in her life, no matter what was going on in my siblings' lives. And I think to be able to say that, having done this type of research and having been exposed to so many children of so many backgrounds and so many family systems that really crave that type of parental support, I'm very grateful that I've a mom and a dad who have cushioned me in many ways
Mm.
in my life to be able to be the
Mhm.
person I am today. Because I think without that cushioning, I could be anyone, and so could
Yeah,
anyone. And that is an important thing to always think about too.
that is true, and I think probably the biggest mentor in my life was my mom as well, and I didn't really grasp it until I was in prison. And she was so fierce and so dedicated to me, and she showed up every week for visiting. She was there. And if anybody said anything negative about me, she'd just cut them off and say, I don't want to hear it. And maybe the one thing I wish I could go back and change in my life is to have focused on that relationship before I went to prison because, my mom was always there and I always thought so highly of her. But wow, if I would have invested more in my mom as an adult, I could have had, 30 or 40 years of the beauty that I had the 10 or 15 years after I got arrested, that the connection that she and I had together. So, yeah, I'd say my
Wow.
mom was my biggest mentor too.
Toby, what would you say you would have done differently in terms of, would it be spending time? Would it be going away without phones for a little bit, what would you say if you could look back
I
and say,
think
this is what I missed?
I think I would have listened more. You know, I was the oldest of 7 kids. We had a busy family and we had a loud family and everybody talked at once, and my husband today, when he would come visit, he'd go, "I don't know how you guys can do this. You're having like 6 conversations at a time and you're talking to this person and somebody's talking over here to this and you just jump into that conversation then you come back to the one you're in." He said, "I don't understand." And I think if I could go back in time, I would just listen more to my mom instead of trying to do so much talking. I just listen and just sit with her and not expect to have to talk to fill in the space because she had so much wisdom and so many things to say. But I think a lot of times the noise just buried some of the things that she wanted to share. And so I think that's what I do different.
It's powerful insight, Toby. And I sometimes have played with this idea in my mind of if we collectively got all the moms in the world to write
Hmm.
one piece of wisdom, and that was the book that was suddenly available, I think
Yeah.
many children around the world would really benefit
Hmm.
from something that is a collective resource, is of this unique shared bond that all the mothers have in
Hmm.
the world. I believe it
Yes.
does exist. So
Yes,
maybe
I
we'll
think
work on
so.
that.
Yeah, I think that would be awesome. I think that'd be awesome. I saw some YouTube video, but some girl in the United States quit her job to go out and to just travel around and ask people one question. And I think it was, what salary do you make or something? And she's turned her whole life. I mean, maybe I should just go out and ask mothers, what's one piece of advice? And I do think you'd come up with a really powerful guidebook.
I think so too,
Because there
Toby.
is
I think
a
so.
mother's wisdom is untouchable.
Yes. Yes. My mom
I
would
love
be snapping her fingers right now.
that. Yes, I just love that. So, was there ever a time in your life that you felt imprisoned, and what did you do to liberate yourself?
Toby, that is a question I've never been asked before, but it is a really interesting one because I a couple of different incidents came up for me. One of them being at a much earlier stage in my life where it became abundantly clear to me that I wanted to be someone who challenged hate violence and hate crimes around me. And in a very personal and close to my heart way, it was a post 9/11 America. And in my own Sikh temple, in my own community, I experienced hate. And I
Mhm,
remember thinking, it is my job to educate, to ensure that every leader in the vicinity, every peer of mine, every person knows exactly who I am and never has to doubt someone of my faith or of another faith background again.
mhm.
And that that was actually my form of imprisonment because it was
Yeah.
a requirement that I put on myself to
Mhm,
take on the onus of something that
mhm.
was so much bigger than myself.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it felt constricting and it felt
Mhm,
very scary to be up against a world that doesn't know who you are, doesn't care who you are,
mhm.
and could potentially harm someone like my brother, someone like my dad, someone like
Yes.
me. My brother and dad both wear turbans in a post 9/11 America, and that is their identity. And all of my friends did. And I would hear about stories and, school
Mhm,
bathrooms or what would happen after school. And at a train station, someone is chased with a bat and told to get out of the country. And those types of stories constantly surrounding me felt like chains to this
mm,
identity that I held so close to me, but was almost captive to in the context of the United States. and
Mhm.
how much hate and media rhetoric was negatively surrounding anyone who looked different, anyone who looked like they were South Asian, Middle Eastern, Muslim, Sikh, Hindu,
Mhm.
anything. Um, and I think the process of liberation, Toby, is still undergoing. I think
Mhm.
I think part of why I do the work that I do in the spaces that I do it is because I don't want to be a part of the perpetrating system that
Mhm.
required me as a Sikh to go and prove to people anything. I wanted
Right.
leaders to come to me and to
Mhm.
immerse themselves in our Sikh temple. I wanted leaders to be the ones to open up a textbook and to read about the Sikh philosophy. I wanted people to do their own job and work of understanding their own biases and challenging them actively.
Mhm.
And so for me, liberation wasn't necessarily on how can I become the biggest Sikh education activist in the world, or how can I go and, become part of the Sikh clergy. It was, which doesn't exist by the way, but I think for me the process of liberation is how can I do a better job of being a liberating force for other
Mhm.
communities that may feel similar to how these communities that have experienced social,
Mhm.
political, systemic failures like my own have might feel.
Yes, I like that, and I really do feel like almost all of our prisons are self-imposed. They're things that we've created a wall with, and then we're not gonna cross that wall. We're not gonna come out from behind that wall because it's safe or and so I really think there's so much work, especially for women to do to let go of whatever walls they've built and just be themselves. Yeah, I
Yes,
think that's
yes, yes,
cool.
absolutely. And you mentioned women in there, and I think that's also very powerful because as you mentioned in my bio, almost my friends joke about it sometimes, but they're like, everything that you do involves women. And it's true. Everything
Mhm,
I do does
mhm,
involve women and girls in some capacity. So I think that also stems from a very early age
mm,
of as young girls we're taught to self-censor, and we're taught that in order to be likable or to be
mhm,
approachable or to be powerful one day, we are going to need to limit what we say or how much
mm.
space we take up or allow for grace and politeness to be the driving
Yes,
force of what we do and say. But I really want to see a world in which young girls are bold and they're
yes,
courageous and they are
mhm,
not afraid to be
mhm,
controversial in how they see things, what they want to say, in the spaces they want to say them. I think it's really important that young girls are confident and empowered to speak their mind and to appear with their full selves without feeling that shame, which I think growing up, a lot of our education system, a lot of our societal
mhm.
structures, a lot of the way that it's, I think, set up at a very young age
The
is
role
meant to
models
discourage
we see, all I mean, there's a few women senators and congressmen, but not nearly like the men, and, we just aren't exposed to a world where women are equal, and I think that makes an impact. And one of the things that I feel really strongly about is that, they built prisons and they had a system and it was working for men and they had weight rooms and they had a gym and when they decided they needed women's prisons, they just did the same thing for women. But women don't need a weight room and women don't need a gym. Women want a creative space and maybe the ability to plant flowers or something, do some kind of gardening and we need to create a prison system for women and not just take what worked for men and adapt it. And I think that would make a big difference too. Have a playroom where mothers and children meet and get to have parties or celebrations and it just can't be the same. So all my work I do too is for women and I was speaking to a class at Boston College this week, a journalism class,
look at
and the
you.
class was yeah, it was so fun. It's my 3rd year for doing it, but, uh, this professor that I made friends with, several years ago, she has a class for journalism students about telling the difficult story, and so each semester I come in as a guest, and And I said, well, I'm creating this 3-day summit for women. And it's like, I'm calling it the metamorphosis journey for women. And I'm really targeting it to be professional women kind of at the midpoint in their life where there's life changes happening. Their children are grown and gone. Their jobs are kind of winding down, and they want to come into themselves and find their purpose. And it's their time to shine. It's their time to really make a difference in the world because they're freed, their time is freed up to do things like that. And somebody said, well, it's for men too. And I said, well, men could come if they want, but no, all the work I do is for women because so many people do work and women just tag into it. But with intention, design everything I do for women. And it's
Hmm.
all kind of emotional work. But I know the emotion of being a woman. I don't know the emotion of being a man. So
Hmm.
I couldn't possibly design a summit for men. I
Hmm.
just isn't where I am.
But
So,
right there, Toby, right there is something so profound too, because you just said, I as a woman understand the experiences or emotions of being a woman, but I couldn't possibly do that for men. But yet, so much of our society, from our politics to our education
yes.
to our healthcare, is designed by
Mhm.
men for women. So I
Yes,
think you
it's
bring up
exactly
such a
right.
great point there.
Yeah, I read, I can't remember, I wish I could remember, but some big college had a event for women International Women's Day, and they had a man keynote speaker, and everybody just threw a fit, and they were like, "Oh, well, we never thought about it." So I think it's coming. I think it's coming, and I'm gonna ride the wave and be part of that change. So
I know you will
yeah.
be, Toby. I know you will.
I just love that. So what's one question you wish I'd asked that we didn't cover?
Maybe when you're gonna come visit the UK, you could have maybe
Ooh, I'd
shared
love
with
to.
me your
Here's the
itinerary.
really interesting thing. A couple years ago, I had a UK news station approach me and they wanted to bring me over to do an interview. Well, guess what? The UK doesn't allow felons to visit. And neither does Canada, or, there's so many countries. So I think that you could probably make an exception to it, but I would really have to, do some work to be able to come into the country. And I would love to.
Wow, even for, like, a visit, they won't allow
No,
someone.
they won't.
Hmm.
So, you know, I think you could work around it. I think if somebody wrote something about who was having you come over, what reason that they had, or you could write something and they could do some research. But on the surface, the answer is no, felons can't visit the country.
Toby, I'm so sorry, I did not know that, but it's something part of this broader system like we were speaking about,
Yes.
of
Mm-hmm.
it's not just a prison, a state, a country.
Right.
It is so much broader, and I know
Mhm.
we've talked about this at length, but that notion of labeling and
Mm.
how how chained it almost becomes when
Mhm.
someone's incarcerated is one that I think, given that 25% of our population is now going to have such a label attached to them, we
Yes.
have to rethink.
Yes.
We have to
That's
reimagine a
right.
society that people can exist and coexist.
That's right. And after I got out of prison, I've been out of prison for 16 years, I think, something like that. It's a long time. I've lived in Massachusetts, Missouri, Kansas, and now I live in Virginia. I have voted in every election, but when I moved to Virginia, the Virginia state law is that felons are not allowed to vote ever. You can write to the governor and get a dispensation and get your voting rights back, which I have now, but it took me 2 years to get that done. So why can I not vote last month, but I could vote 2 years ago and my vote was valid? All these blanket statements of no felons, no this, no men, no women. No, you just can't have those blanket statements because each of us is different and each of us needs to be looked at as a person and not just as a label.
Toby,
I
I
did.
every time I speak with you, not only do you broaden my own scope of understanding and knowledge of this broader system, but also your experiences, but also I think you light a fire in me of
Ah,
this is how, why? And I appreciate you for always pushing me in that way, and for help, and for being willing to share these these battles that you have to face regularly on a daily basis. That is something that I don't face on a daily basis, but for you to be willing to share that with me
Mhm.
and to everyone who's listening and watching is very powerful, because it helps speak to the issue that is, we keep those who are incarcerated as well as prisons so far away, so that we actually never
Mhm.
know about their day-to-day struggles. So if we bring it more into light, like
That's
you are
true.
doing here, it is going to allow more people to have
Mhm.
that fire lit, more people to
That's
question, more
right.
people to
I
wonder.
love that. I just love that you said that, and I feel really honored to think that I light a fire in you, because I think you're out there lighting fires in all kinds of people and lighting fires in the world. So I feel really honored to have that recognition from you.
Thank you, Toby.
So, when we go to prison, we go to court and we've done something wrong, and the judge and the jury or the attorneys, whoever you're dealing with, they decide what payment they want from you to right the wrong that you did. And that's your sentence. But if that's true, then your sentence should end the minute you leave prison. You've done what they ask of you. You've paid your debt to society. Now you should be free to move on. But you're not. You got to fight for your right to vote. You got to fight for your right to
Mm,
rent an apartment. So
mm,
many apartment rental places will not lease an apartment to a felon.
mm.
So it's just so difficult. So really, truly, your sentence is never served. It just goes on and on and on. So that's something I
Wow.
think that we need to change.
Wow.
So
Toby, I'm so
is
glad
that
you speak a voice to this.
yes, thank you. And I feel like I live here in the Washington, D.C. area, and I'm trying to find a place that I can have a voice that makes a difference, because I'm right here in the middle of stuff.
Mm.
I'm perfectly situated, so trying to make that happen.
And you are.
Yeah, thank you. Is there a question that you'd like to ask me?
Toby, to be honest, I think I have asked you
You've
around
asked me
two
lots of
hours worth
questions.
of questions.
Yes, yes.
I have I have asked you so many questions, and granted, it was a little bit ago. I
Mhm,
I feel that I do have. Um, I feel like I've taken so much knowledge and information from you, so I'm grateful to
mhm.
that you have asked me to come and give even a small fraction of what the time is that you gave to me. And truly, I know how many months it's taken to be able to schedule this, but you've been so
Yes.
flexible and so
Well,
kind,
I'm just
and I am so appreciative.
so excited to be a part of your work. That some of the things I've said will make it into your work, and you just are allowing me to have even a bigger voice. So I just love that.
Thank you, Toby. And I think you have already had a big, huge, giant voice. And if this work can only serve to be another vehicle through which your voice is able to carry itself, that is my hope.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. So what's one word that inspires you?
Um, I think it's fearlessness,
Oh, I
because
like that.
a
That's a
lot
good
of
one.
our world and a lot of the way we navigate through the world is through fear of what will
Mhm.
others think, what will others say,
Mhm.
what will happen if I do X, Y, and Z. But I find that the role models I have are the ones who, yes, have fearlessness, but
Mhm.
also have had fears that they've had to put on pause in order to be able to do the work they want to do, or to reach their purpose. And I think
I
it's
love
it's
that.
what we're doing right here too. We're putting aside so many fears of what it
Yes.
means to speak about these things and how to speak about them in order to be able to work towards a broader whole.
Well, you can't really make a change if you don't bring something into the open so that people can see it and know that it needs to change. So I think that that's the power of the work you're doing. And I love, that you're going after areas that no one else touches. It's not soft and pretty and tied up in ribbons and bows. It's gritty and hard. And I think that's awesome.
Thanks so
So
much,
thank you so
Susie.
much, Serene. You're welcome. I delighted in having you here. And who knows, maybe I will make it over to the UK. I'm going to keep it on my list.
Keep
I'm
it on
just going
your
to have
list.
to prepare longer than
There
I
we
thought
go.
I'd have
And I will keep you posted when I'm back in the States, whenever that does
to.
happen.
Okay, that'll be awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank
Thank you
you,
for
Toby.
joining us, Serene.
Thank you so much. Take good care.
Thank you for tuning in to Fierce Conversations with Toby. Your support means the world, and I hope today's episode made a positive impact on you. To keep our conversations going, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen. A 5-star rating, like, comment, or review helps tremendously in spreading our message. You can also support the show by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/fierceconversations. All members receive a downloadable gratitude journal and access to a private Facebook group. Plus, 10% of your subscription goes directly to donating my workbooks to women in prison. Finally, sharing this episode with your friends and family is a great way to amplify our mission. Fierce Conversations is created and hosted by me, Toby Dorr, with production by Number 3 Productions. The theme music, Grooving, composed by Lisa Plass, features Lisa on flute, Carolyn Parody on piano, and Tony Ventura on bass. Learn more at tobydor.com. Thanks for listening, and remember, escape your prison.